Welcome, everyone. Got some exciting thoughts to share. Really not extensive, but we'll see where it takes us. Um, okay, so we've been looking at the Hawaiian Islands, especially here, under the possibility that they are the remnants of a sphere that broke apart as the Earth expanded. Moving from up here down this way and then over this way, which is where the magnetic anomalies really come into play. Because essentially the Earth expanded and was a smaller radius where there was a current underneath that coming from a mantle puncture hole here in India that propagated in all directions, but then stabilized to the shapes that we see here, and then caused expansion, and then essentially caused, though, a propagation this way through North America, around it, really, around its, like, craton, and then it flowed over into resistance, because it also propagated eastward, causing a boundary here. Okay, so in so doing, it basically produces a general moving boundary that has all sorts of effects, where it's over here, and then it moves out further. But this whole segment Eastern Pacific Ocean did not exist yet. Oceanic crustal age map. We can just look at a map like this. This basically didn't exist. It was only the blue region and like just the beginning of the yellow, maybe yellow to a degree, but really we want to focus more on the darker blue, teal, green. And then yellow and red and orange really were around the rapid expansion of the Earth, which began around 66 million years. So those are more from like here back. This is all newly formed after the rapid expansion. So really the Pacific was just over here mostly, this material, in a sort of 9 ammonite-like shape. That was actually over here, because the current was actually directly flowing from here to here, because this didn't exist yet, and expanding outward like this. Initially, though, like, not just doing this whole shape, like it, although maybe it rapidly formed this shape. I'm not sure how. I mean, essentially that is in this time frame, but like once it reached it, maybe it rapidly did form that. And then it just like spiraled there. The currents were basically trapped by this force over here, and then a current coming from down here, from basically southern South America through Antarctica and into southeastern Australia, where it then collided with this current and this current to kind of create like a pinch region, which then just ballooned. Like the current then eddied in that pinched region and ballooned and just created pressures on the continental crust segments that were just a single landmass beginning to fracture apart. And so there's an eddy here, generally speaking, that's producing a bunch of nova events that we can see. But it's really going on up here, like further up and further over when this is happening, like the crux of it, before the currents can flow into the openings between the continents and just spread the earth more evenly. It's just like focusedly creating eddies here. So yesterday I was talking about in my measuring video, this one, measurements, I found myself talking about the position of this here, specifically this dragon shape, the very tip of it. We can distinctly see the dragon shape here, so that means the very tip of it is right here, even though that's not as clearly that in the magnetic data. Although in the magnetic data, it looks like it's also like here, like it stretched as the eddies formed. Like initially, it was maybe just a thought. Like this one and this one were like basically this point. What's interesting about this, and why I wanted to record this, is, mind you, if we go up, it's up here is this boundary where a current coming this way meets a current coming this way, and then they just cause this upward motion, and then Hawaii is formed in this line there where the currents are in collision, in line with also this thing. But then I noticed, it occurred to me, where is this thing? So down here we have this like spiral of a magnetic field around a particle that I've talked about several times. Anything about an angel. Let's see. I'm liking the idea of just when I feel like referencing something, just being like these videos, like this one, and then another one. Oh, I guess that's the only one I called that. Probably, I mean, just based on these images, I'm looking in the regions. It doesn't matter. At least this one. So this, I've been talking about the potential of it actually having some correlation to here, where the current comes around and then wraps around and like runs into here. And maybe this point where it's running into is actually where this current coming from this way is like meeting it, like the boundary initially. It's maybe like here, like Yellowstone. But then from Yellowstone is this magnetic field. It's a little less defined over here in terms of what it may be. Like it, but over here it's got the really distinct with a lot of like turbulence here, which seems to be kind of a feature over here compared to here, where something on this side happened that didn't happen on this side. So here's this thing, but really interestingly is from this thing is this really narrow channel that has like tridents up, over, up, over, up, over, up, over, up. But the main current here, this line, runs right into here. After that, it doesn't seem as distinct. I mean, partly it's crossing this opening. So maybe it crosses the opening, goes down, and then it reaches like the opposing side where there's a more solid material, because here it's an opening. It's like boiling. It's in essence it's boiling is a good way to put it, probably. Whereas over here is like the solid material on the side of the boiling. Like if you just leave a pot boiling and the things start to solidify around the edges, and then a current runs across through the boiling, like it, but falling down because it's like off of the top, so it falls down into it, but then it like boils up and applies pressure on this other side, maybe. Here. That's just the kind of appearance that has. So my thought, though, is like maybe each of these lines is correlated to some sort of energetic exchange from this point and this point, where like maybe it was even forming initially at the same position, but then it started to physically move, but they were still bonded, energetically interacting in a way where this was kind of like a... thinking here, and then it like energetically moved it. Maybe that's what's going on. It like moves it, lifts it here, lifts it here, lifts, like rolls it. Like it sits there, gets lodged there, this particle type thing, but then it moves, it gets moved by these like forking elements to then move to like all of these like weird, really dark round spots around that to ultimately arrive here. I don't know. It would be so cool. Sorry if I'm just like thinking about things, because it would be so cool if kind of thing, more so than anything. Although here is more of like a linear one that maybe makes more sense if it like went across here and then even rolled through here, went this way, rolled through here, rolled through here. That actually makes sense, and then rolled out. Rolled out. I'm feeling that one. Let's say hypothetically the particle is physically formed adjacent to this system, which is Yellowstone, perhaps. And then it, like, energetically is forming this, and Yellowstone are closely tied. It's not literally Yellowstone, but it's closely tied. Maybe it's positive, and then Yellowstone is like this is the dense half to the Yellowstone's subtle, like fluid lava half, cold, hard, hot, flowing. In a way where it like lifts Hawaii like in steps, and that it lifts it here and then breaks off chunks maybe. I don't know. Oh, that would be so cool if there was some like fundamental radioactive decay process like on display in the currents here where it moves it boop 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 boop. I mean, it does look like it goes kind of in a straight line here and then has this kind of maybe secondary one over this way. Like it just literally rolls across the current. I don't know. Maybe a little wishful thinking. And it goes into here, hits here, goes into here even, and then wraps back around. Or wait. I don't know. How did I get it down there that time? This way, this way, this way. And then it somehow just drops. Like it loses its momentum here. And starts to fall back. Maybe that would make sense for why there's a spike. Like it really loses its momentum and just kind of sits here for a bit and it attaches and then it rolls away down here and detaches, causing like a spike. Like it pulled by detaching, it just pulls up some like spike in the region, leaving behind its outer like divot from just resting there. Attaches again, rests there to a degree, and then rolls down to here. Or it attaches here for a little bit maybe, or here. It would be so cool. Cool enough that I'm gonna keep looking into it, but I don't really, I don't have any like attachment to it as a thing. I wish this might. I just cannot scroll with this mouse. It doesn't work. I do like the shape of that and that looking correlated. Where is that? Let's see. This is at 149.5, 19.8. No. Maybe somewhere in this area, I guess. I don't know what to make of it right now, but for sure there's a bunch of these branching things going off. whether or not they're related to this system or just like from other currents that are in the region, maybe crossing the region. Like it looks like something going on here. Seems like some sort of boundary between the certain inlets into the collisions of currents. That end as it like as the Earth expanded, it kind of left behind the boundaries imprinted, maybe, because it kind of looks like it's related more to this current. And that then initially was probably going up like along more of a boundary like this. But then the Earth expanded, so it ended up going up here, up through here, and even this way. Maybe. I'm not sure. I think that's how the ammonite of the Pacific works. Earth viewer. I don't want to do that. Let's check out this ammonite in the Pacific. I think this is where I saw it. Okay. Here we go. We need to be pretty recent. Here we go. This is where the currents are here, just kind of caused to swirl in this region where that tip of the dragon nose is. And then it starts to like branch out this way and wrap around basically until it gets in when the Earth starts to expand, which is around 60, around here it's starting to rapidly expand. So this current, there's a current basically coming, this is up here in reality, like attached here, generally up this way. And there's a current coming this way that creates a boundary around here, but then a second current going this way that then feeds into, essentially across into here. And so as the Earth starts to expand, it's going to start to feed more like into this open region that has less pressure than over here. Because it's opening in this region as the Earth expands, it occurs more in the oceans at that point than if the currents flowing underneath the continents. Initially, the currents are just flowing under the continents because that's what pre-existed. But once it flowed under the entirety of the continents, it basically, the pressure started to create openings enough where once the bonds broke, then it just filled in the space between until an equilibrium was arrived at. So we see that happening here where it's suddenly, right like that even, like it burst there. That's probably the current exactly that is even being mapped by some data that has caused this like change like that. And then the energy goes over. Mind you, this is more so like up here. Right? Like, what is this going into? It's just pushing against us, maybe? This is where the magnetic field's happening, here. Here. This is all the way over here. It's so confusing without an actual accurate map. It's literally connected to North America and being separated by this ocean, forming a space between by an eddy that really starts to spread the region because of currents flowing in all directions from a mantle puncture hole in India. Which is actually up here. Like, it's just utterly confusing with the plate tectonics model because it's not true. The Earth expanded. Or at least that's what science will conclude, is the Earth expanded. When science is like done, it's not going to be like plate tectonics. It's going to say Earth functions under the process of expansion, where it expanded. Because it's supernova. It radioactively decayed. It did the same thing that other particles do. It doesn't do its own, like, plate tectonics thing. Cool. Glad we're on the same page. If that made no sense, well, pardon me. Okay. So the current goes through there, breaks through, so that whatever's going on is it breaks through. I guess the resistance of this region. Like, there's two adjacent eddies. There's actually one eddy under North America and one eddy under Australia. Like this eddy over here that produced the ammonite. I don't think it's this. They're the same, even though it has a bunch of, like, distinct figure eights within it. It's overlaying one another. Like, the older ones are missing parts, but their shapes are still there. Like, we can see here, and then generally down, like, up this way. So there's a big figure eight that was basically the entire Australia. And I do not believe it was this one. So maybe Australia was like the cold dense mass equivalent to this hot fluid mass equivalent to this hotter fluider mass. Like a positive separator, negative. Oh, Lord. Okay. I don't know what to make of it. So I really want to like reason through this feature. This feature here, coupled with this dragon thing, coupled with Hawaii, coupled with Yellowstone and its magnetic field equivalent feature, coupled with Australia's ammonite magnetic fields. Like they're all the whatever's going on between them really would explain a lot. I can see that. I just can't like deduce exactly what it was. Good old donut shirt. I was like, yeah, I gotta show the colors. I gotta show the colors. They're the same colors. Ain't that something? What is going on with this thing? Oh my god. One. Oh my god. Okay, so we got 232 mass, right? And then it goes to 228 mass. But then from 228 mass, it goes over to different protons. Same mass. But then it can be the same protons and a different mass. Although that's not in the same line, interestingly. I wonder if this can happen at all. Or if it really just goes this way. Because essentially, like, where it goes up is like it's losing mass, but where it goes sideways is like it's changing its like positive negative like proton number which then moves it to a side, like it turns it kind of like that's that way, this way, like it changes the notch that it's on, but it doesn't change the like distance away from this direction while just going sideways, even though it does like effectively change it over here. Then it goes in a straight line, goes over. Okay, here we got something where it goes down, over, and stays the same mass, different protons. So essentially, two downs, like over and over, but then they go forward and then maybe reconverge. Do they reconverge at all? Not in the distinct way that this is distinct and this is distinct. It's not, it's pretty subtle what's going on over here, for instance. This maybe is. What was here? What is this correlated to? I've seen it a couple times. I've thought about it a couple times. I think I even suggested somewhere, but I've forgotten. Maybe over here. I feel like somewhere actually has like a similar imprint, like maybe here. Because Australia would have been generally there. So it runs into Australia, runs into the Pacific. This one balloons in the Pacific over here. This one goes over like this and balloons. This one actually goes under Australia this way, right this way, where it then meets a cross current and causes this here. Cross current from generally here. Here initially, maybe initially here, but then it built up this wall. Like it wasn't always like this. It just wasn't like this. Like this is more so the after effects of how it was shaped by the process. The entire Earth is like that. Like it had a just a generally uniform singular surface, and then it just separated by the currents. This looks a lot like it's related to. Australia was here. Let's say Australia was here. Then, past Australia, up here, maybe even past Papua New Guinea. Papua New Guinea was here, so maybe the dragon feature is like related to this region. This general region that's probably also been reshaped to not show its features as well. There's a figure 8 there. This doesn't really have any figure 8s, but this figure 8 has a yin yang within it here. Okay, let's just say this looks like Australia here sufficiently to maybe suppose it was there and start thinking about it like that. If it was there, then it needs to have a current like right there, right here. Ooh, which it probably did. Like this current probably initially came in exactly at that angle, But then this mound of material was just blocking its way, so it was getting deflected over here. And ultimately then it channeled through. Like a path. For here. To kind of create this boundary here. I don't know. Although this region looks like a explosion. Which is from a boundary being broken. So I would suggest that if this is the location that feature is generally related to is here, that the current crossed it here and created like a sufficiently detectable barrier so as to produce like these explosive type of currents rather than just like as it was. So now it looks kind of like a candle. Current coming this way. Which maybe led to like this way, like generally speaking. To here. It's a little tricky in this region. Because the mantle puncture hole is here, and it flows out in all directions, but then it kind of has a boundary below it right here that forms across this way. And then a boundary just above it across this way. So it's almost like it forms like just above and just below the mantle puncture hole. So something's doing it. So there's a pressure pushing this way, generally speaking. Although there are cross currents from the mantle puncture hole that go this way, especially related to the storm in Gujarat. But it may be that that current generally cuts across here, which then at some point ultimately went across into here. Maybe this way initially. Then as the earth expanded, maybe more so this way. Then it wraps and hits a hard boundary. I don't know. And starts to just really flow down the boundary like that. I don't. This seems more related to a current coming this way. It would carve through this if it was legitimately a current going like that right through all this. Like, if it reached this thing, it would produce some kind of path. I know the subtleties of the things I'm looking at are like, is any of this even there? Woe is me. Woe is me. So, like, essentially, Hawaii, as I've been talking about, is kind of like a nucleus because it's actually the inner surface. If it was a sphere, it would have to be the inner surface supported by like the mantle, and then at the base, like an outer surface. So that essentially, what we're seeing with the islands of Hawaii here are the inner particle, the inner shell. So that beyond a certain amount, like back here, we start to really run into like an outer shell of the particle somewhere. And I maybe cheatingly, I'm not sure, or lazily, or it's impossible to do otherwisely. I just considered these islands and was like, well, they're above, so like they're so tall that maybe that means like they're the distance from the base to the top is somehow reflective of which orbital they were part of. So maybe they're like one orbital shell, or not orbital, one shell, whatever, like of a gang ring. I don't know how to, like this kind of thing. That was a good one that I just was looking at here. So Hawaii, the islands are kind of like here, and then the bottom of the mantle of the, like, not mantle, the seamounts inclusive of mantle material, molten material from the mantle that formed into a stable sphere and is still contained molten within the container boundary that has solidified to hold it within, is this region only. But then like these outer regions peeled away, so like a sphere like this was rolling along, so it was losing like the outer parts first, but it was more energetically rolling, where it behaved much more like chemistry and just the not more like a rock rolling, not like a rock rolling down a hill, but having really pronounced features of like the chemistry of the process as the like shells are removed, seemingly having been formed in a sphere shape and not like something like this, really like this. But hollow, because we're looking at the inner surface. So more like this. Or at least hollow enough where whatever was within it was like sufficiently subtle to not even be like atop it anymore. Like maybe it had something within it, like air or some ether or something within it, but it just released it when it broke apart. And it wasn't like rock that now sits atop the spherical layer. Okay. But there's gotta be, if this is going on, where there's this, here's the location of this thing right next to Fiji. Right here. So if that's like spear thing, maybe it's this. No. I think it is at this here. Otherwise not detectable really, like in this region. If this spear thing energetically is related to this, then it must have some relationship to something of this nature going on. And then it's decaying its components, like literally, like it's breaking off its outer ring, its outer shell. It's physically broken off, detached from the system, making it a different particle. Whereas the space can be opened within the same mass by a current flowing, which then causes an opening for current to flow within the same mass, which is essentially then a proton. So it has the same general mass, but they've added an opening, or an opening within it of I know that doesn't make much sense to people who haven't seen what I've been talking about much. Where is it? There it is. Essentially, this is probably not the best one. Essentially, a polygon with a cold, dense boundary in which like more fluids can flow that are not as dense and solidified. That then where the space itself is a proton, but then the current brings in masses which then produce mounds around them. So like the current is a proton, where the current can flow within the polygonal boundary is a proton, where it produces a mound is a neutron. So like this system can just have this neutron break apart. I mean, generally speaking, like that type of thing can happen in a way where essentially the same like system just has one of the mounds become a place where current can flow. So that's what's going on here. It's just like a mound is being removed from the system, or at least redistributed throughout the system, where its mass generally stays the same, but it's has an added proton. And then electrons then are the actual current that flows within the space of the polygon. But it's breaking off specific pieces. So almost assuredly, that's what's going on here. Is like radioactive decay, where like who knows what atom it began as equivalently, like uranium, and then started to break down into smaller, subtler systems where it was only able to be stable as whatever the equivalent of the Big Island is, which is maybe just a hydrogen atom with a neutron and a proton. At like one scale, like those are the dominant systems, so it's maybe equivalent to a hydrogen atom, although it has other volcanoes that maybe make it more like maybe even a chemical bond is present where it's more of a molecule, etc. For sure, if it was a sphere, it was here, it moved here, it moved here, it moved here, and as it moved, the bonds broke, and it caused these strikes here. Especially when this segment and this segment detached to this one and this one don't seem to be as pronounced. Maybe there's something going on there in these two, but it's certainly not as pronounced, and there doesn't seem to be any up here. I'm just wondering if like certain bits were broken off and caught in the currents and just moved. Or if it had to be up here. Or if it's not related to Hawaii, this. I would like to think this is related to Hawaii. Obviously. Because of the radioactive decay potential. Where maybe it is something of that nature going on. And it's actually visible here. then how would it work? They could have moved the particle over here and then have it just break off pieces until it finally rolls away here. Goes like this, and breaks off final chunks where this one is actually these, and this is more so these. And this is maybe that one-ish. Like perhaps these ones could be made as another particle even, or like it's not just one particle that is here. Maybe many particles got laid out. Like initially the currents were colliding and running down this way as the Earth started to expand until it really started to form at this position. But then that started to like distribute it in the current also, which then went down this way as another boundary point. Not sure why that would be a boundary point from this current over here, flowing out here, generally out here. Plus there's a relationship to Hawaii from down here. This current that goes this way also goes this way to through this thing. Oh yeah, goes up this way through here, or through here. Here's another feature, like what was going on over there. But generally goes through here up to Hawaii. Like there's some kind of energetic relationship in that regard too. So maybe that held an upward boundary while this held like this was more of a sideways current, and then the current from the mantle or from the Himalayas flowing over this way maybe held like another boundary here because they went across this current. So there's a current going this way plus a current going this way, so then it's almost like maybe this dragon feature was more here initially, like in this current. No. Although it may be the same process. So many details to consider. Oh my god. If anyone is moved by these ideas to investigate further, that would be super duper. Because, I mean, there's certainly something to this related to this to Australia. I mean, it's certainly there's a relationship, whether or not they're actually the same next to each other, how many exactly there were, and why they're all interrelated in this way, I'm not sure, but clearly something's up with these. Alright, peace.